Let me tell you something right now, and I want you to listen like your life depends on it. Because maybe, just maybe, the way you look at the world is about to change. You know how people like to sit around and talk about power moves. Like who's making waves, who's stirring the pot, who's shaking up the status quo. Well, let me tell you. India just made a move so loud, so bold, so strategic, that even America had to stop, blink twice and say, wait, what just happened? This ain't just about politics, it ain't just about economics, and it sure as heaven ain't just about military deals. No, no, this is about a shift, a turn, a transformation, a moment in history that generations are gonna look back on and say, that right there, that was when the game changed. Because while everyone else was playing checkers, India pulled out a whole different board. They brought out chess pieces carved from discipline, vision, patience, and heritage. And they played big, and I mean big. See, here's what America, and frankly much of the West, didn't see coming. They didn't expect India to stop playing small. They expected India to stay in the shadows, to keep nodding politely at global summits, to keep following instead of leading. But India had something else brewing. A quiet storm building over decades. A silent roar in the hearts of over 1 billion people, just waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, baby, it came with thunder. You know why it shocked America? Because America thought it had the whole map figured out. It thought the global alliances were set, the players were predictable, and the outcomes were written. But India said, let me reintroduce myself. And oh, what an introduction it was. They moved with confidence, with courage, and most importantly, with clarity. See, here's something you need to understand. You don't rise by accident. You don't suddenly become powerful overnight. It takes pain. It takes purpose. It takes people willing to put in the grind when no one's clapping. It takes a country rooted deep in culture, but reaching high with innovation. It takes a mindset that says we don't need permission to lead, we were born for it. And that's what India's been doing, quietly, steadily, like a lion in the grass. And while others were making noise, India was making progress. While the world was bickering, India was building. While they were focused on selfies and sound bites, India was focused on satellites and science. While others scrambled for influence, India earned it with consistency, integrity, and a relentless spirit. And now they've stepped out of the shadows. Now they're walking tall on the global stage, not asking for a seat at the table, but building their own table, bringing their own chairs, and saying, y'all can sit if you want, but we're already eating. And America wasn't ready for that, because America's used to calling the shots, used to being the boss in the room. But guess what? India just walked in wearing a suit made of strategy and said, we're not employees anymore, we're partners, equal partners. And let me tell you, that messes with the system, that disrupts the routine, that rattles the cage, because for the longest time, power was centralized. You had the few who dictated terms and the many who followed. But India said, not anymore. They flipped the script, turned the tables, and changed the game. And you know what the most beautiful part is? They didn't do it with noise, they did it with knowledge. They didn't do it with aggression, they did it with ambition. They didn't do it by tearing others down, they did it by lifting themselves up. Now let me take you deeper, because I want you to understand how big this move really is. India didn't just shock America with one moment. This move was years in the making. It was born in classrooms and labs, in rural villages and high-tech cities. It came from ancient scriptures and futuristic AI. It came from grit, from sacrifice, from generations of people who believed that their time would come. And now it's here. See, there's a reason India has over 1 million engineers graduating every year. There's a reason Indian entrepreneurs are leading Silicon Valley. There's a reason Indian scientists are breaking new ground in space, medicine, and defense. And there's a reason Indian diplomats are suddenly becoming the calmest, most calculated voices in every major negotiation. Because India didn't just build muscles, they built mindsets. They trained their people to think long term. They taught them to embrace failure, to learn from it, to grow through it. They instilled values that the world can't ignore anymore. And then they backed it up with action. India's trade policies, strategic, their defense advancements, lethal and locally made, their foreign relations, balanced and brilliant, their economic planning, calculated, inclusive, and visionary, and their leadership, baby, it's not just smart, it's spiritually grounded and unapologetically proud. So when India made that move, the one that shocked America, it wasn't just about a military decision or a diplomatic pivot. It was a declaration that said, we're not just part of history, we're here to make it. A declaration that echoed across boardrooms and battlefields, across think tanks and town halls, across media studios and military bases. And America heard it loud and clear because they realized something. This wasn't a moment. It was a movement powered by unity, fueled by belief, and sustained by a billion dreams converging into one unstoppable vision. Let me pause for a second and speak to anyone who ever doubted their power, anyone who ever felt invisible, anyone who ever thought they had to play small to survive. Look at India. Look at how they stayed the course. Look at how they refused to be defined by anyone else's narrative. Look at how they took their pain, their setbacks, their centuries of struggle, and turned it into the most powerful asset any nation can have, identity. That's right, India remembered who it was, and when a person or a country remembers who they are, they become unstoppable. So let me ask you, what's your identity? Have you forgotten who you are? Have you shrunk yourself to make others comfortable? Have you silenced your roar because the world told you to whisper? Because if India can rise, if India can shock the most powerful nation on earth with nothing but vision, values, and verifiable progress, then baby, what's stopping you? The truth is, power is not about weapons, it's not about wealth, it's about will, and India has the will of 1 billion people burning with purpose. You can't beat that. You can't intimidate that. You can only respect it, and that's what America is starting to do, respect India, not just as a partner, not just as an ally, but as a power. Now, some people will try to minimize it. They'll say, it's just a move, it's temporary, it's symbolic. But those people, they ain't paying attention, because when a country moves with purpose, every step becomes permanent. This ain't temporary, this is tectonic, this is legacy, and what makes it even more powerful is that India didn't beg for recognition, they earned it. They earned it through innovation, they earned it through intention, they earned it through integrity. So don't you dare let anyone tell you India's success is accidental. Don't let them say it's luck. Don't let them chalk it up to timing. No, it's character, it's courage, it's conviction. India has always had the ingredients. Now it's cooking with fire, and America better start learning the new recipe, because the game has changed, the script has flipped, and the world is watching. So if you're sitting out there wondering how to make your mark, how to play big, how to shock the world, take notes from India. Stay rooted, stay focused, move in silence but strike with substance, be patient but precise, and when your time comes, don't just knock on the door. Kick it wide open and walk through like you own the building. Because if a nation like India, once colonized, criticized, underestimated, can now lead, influence, and inspire at a global level, then what excuse do you have? None. That's the power of belief. That's the power of persistence. That's the power of playing big, and that, my friends, is the move that shocked America. India didn't just play big. India became big, and they did it without noise, without war, without compromise. They did it by remembering who they are. Now it's your turn. Remember who you are, because when you do, the world won't be ready for what's coming next. India proved something in 2025 that many nations before it tried to demonstrate but never truly mastered. It proved that national identity and modern progress can thrive together, not just coexist, but feed one another, empower one another, and elevate a civilization to heights once thought unreachable. That truth wasn't just born in a laboratory, or a parliament, or a battlefield. It was born in the soul of the Indian people. For too long, the world tried to convince rising nations that in order to modernize, they had to westernize. That to grow economically, they had to surrender their traditions. That to be taken seriously on the world stage, they had to wear a mask that didn't fit. But India didn't just remove the mask. India built its own face and looked the world dead in the eyes with it. This wasn't an overnight revelation. It was a process years in the making. Centuries of resistance, decades of economic struggle, waves of colonization, fragmentation, division. And through it all, a people that never let go of their sense of self. The colors, the languages, the rituals, the philosophies. India had the kind of cultural depth most countries couldn't even dream of, and yet it wasn't buried in its past. It stood with one foot in ancient wisdom and the other in digital revolution. When America finally turned its head and gasped, India did what? They weren't just reacting to a single political or military move. They were waking up to the fact that India had rewritten the formula. For decades, Western think tanks thought the model was simple. Cut ties with tradition, open up your markets, mimic Western structures, and join the club. India said, "We'll build our own club." It marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine, backed by innovation. But that doctrine didn't rise from ego or aggression. It rose from self-realization. The realization that sovereignty doesn't just mean borders, it means mindsets. It means owning your story. It means defending your values not just with weapons, but with ideas, with institutions, with intent. In the past, India's strength was underestimated because its power wasn't loud. It wasn't built on shock and awe campaigns. It wasn't defined by naval fleets docking on foreign shores. It was rooted in something far more dangerous to the old order: internal coherence. India found a way to align its cultural essence with its scientific ambition, to merge its philosophical foundation with cutting-edge policy, to harmonize village wisdom with global vision. That kind of alignment doesn't just build weapons, it builds unshakable will. It doesn't just train armies, it trains generations. See, while the world was measuring power in missiles and money, India was building a different kind of arsenal. An arsenal of minds, of engineers who still honored their grandparents' prayer, of doctors who could speak both Sanskrit and Python, of diplomats who could quote both the Gita and the Constitution. That's a different kind of strength, a layered strength, not one-dimensional power, but multi-dimensional presence. India didn't trade identity for progress, it integrated both, and when it did that, something remarkable happened. It became unpredictable, and nothing scares the established powers more than unpredictability. Because you can calculate the moves of a country that follows your model. But what do you do with a nation that bows to no model but its own? India built fighter jets with ancient mandala designs in their hangars. It launched satellites into space with mantras still echoing in mission control. It funded AI development with budgets approved in a parliament whose architecture is still inspired by Vedic geometry. It proved that you don't have to become someone else to matter. You just have to become more of who you are strategically, boldly, and unapologetically. What happened in 2025 wasn't just a shock to America. It was a jolt to the narrative. The assumption that modernization meant westernization cracked, and through that crack, light poured in from the east. The people who once mocked India's chaos began to realize it wasn't chaos. It was complexity. It was a civilization capable of holding contradictions without collapsing. Democracy and discipline, tradition and technology, diversity and unity, rural heartbeats and urban muscle. Most systems implode under that kind of pressure. India found a way to grow stronger. Now imagine what that does to the global order. When the second largest population in the world says, we will rise, but on our own terms, it forces everyone else to reevaluate the terms themselves. If you can blend Sanskrit with software code, if you can teach quantum physics in Tamil, if you can negotiate defense deals in one moment and conduct temple festivals in the next, then maybe the whole idea of progress has to be redefined. That's what India did. It redefined progress, not as a straight line away from your roots, but as a spiral that grows outward while still anchored at the center. A spiral that respects the past without being trapped in it. That's not regression, that's evolution. And when a nation evolves like that, when it develops both tanks and temples, both blockchain and Bhagavad Gita, both satellites and swamis, you can't box it anymore. You can't simplify it, and you sure as hell can't control it. That's what shook America. Not just the move itself, but the realization that India had outgrown every framework designed to explain it. No more non-aligned. No more third world. No more developing. India wasn't emerging. It had emerged, fully formed, fully unique, fully sovereign, not just in politics, but in spirit, and that sovereignty showed up everywhere. In the way India dealt with its neighbors, in how it handled internal dissent, in how it crafted new economic corridors, in how it educated its youth to love their heritage and lead the world at the same time. The message was clear: modernity without identity is a mirage, and identity without modernity is a memory. But when you fuse both, you create legacy, and that legacy, it doesn't ask for validation. It commands respect. India didn't just want to catch up to the West. It wanted to offer an alternative, a civilization that didn't erase its symbols to be taken seriously, a nation that didn't have to change its accent to have influence, a people that didn't hide their faith to fit into boardrooms. That's revolutionary. That's frightening to systems built on uniformity, but it's also magnetic. Young leaders across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America began looking at India not just as a fellow nation, but as a blueprint. A living example that you don't have to betray your culture to win the future. You don't have to choose between temples and tech parks. You can have both. You must have both, because one fuels the other. Spiritual strength fortifies scientific ambition. Cultural depth stabilizes capitalist growth. National pride ensures national endurance. And this wasn't just some top-down policy shift. It was a grassroots wave. You could feel it in Indian music that mixed ancient ragas with trap beats, in startups that sold yoga mats using blockchain, in politicians who quoted Chanakya in one breath and economic data in the next. That's synthesis, that's power, and it's not loud. It doesn't need to be, because real power is quiet, rooted. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up and shifts the atmosphere. India walked into 2025 not just as a country with potential, but as a country that realized its potential. And more importantly, as a country that didn't compromise its soul in the process. That's rare. That's dangerous to systems that thrive on making people forget who they are. Because once you remember, once you reconnect, you become unstoppable. And India remembered. It remembered the strength of its stories, the power of its poets, the resilience of its farmers, the brilliance of its mathematicians, the grace of its artists, the fire of its revolutionaries. And it remembered that progress isn't about leaving those things behind. It's about bringing them forward. India made modernity bow to its heritage, not the other way around, and that's not just shocking. That's revolutionary.